Mr. Chairman, you're live on YouTube.
Okay, I will call to order this meeting of the Senate Appropriations Committee Friday, February 17 at 8 a.m. Please call the roll.
Senator Anderson.
Here.
Senator Guru.
Here.
Senator Nethercott.
Excused.
Senator Salazar and Chairman Kinsky.
Here. Thank you. We have before us two substantive matters and two re-referrals. The first is HB 64, Legislative Stabilization Reserve Account Obligations. That one may take some time. That's one that worked on the interim with CapFin for months. 208 is School Foundation Program Reserve Account Investments. That's a little bit easier, but again, it's one of a suite of bills. And then a re-referral, HB 38 National Guard members and HB 59 National Guard tuition benefits. With that, Legislative Stabilization Reserve Account Obligations, I'll turn it over to Polly and Brian. Welcome.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Polly Scott, LSO, Budget Fiscal. When the committee met last week on House Bill 64, we went through the progression of what the CapFin considered last fall in the working draft, then went through the bill, and the committee requested an amendment, which you have in your packets today. Mr. Chairman, you also asked for a chart summarizing the three different documents, the working draft, the bill, and the amendment, and you have that in front of you. And so, as we discussed last week, the bill, as it is right now, does three things. It reduces the amount of a potential loan from the LS.
Does everybody have this chart? Okay, thank you. Sorry, Polly.
Yeah, so it's real quick. The bill as it is, it reduces the amount of a potential loan from the LSRA to YDOT from a cap of $200 million to $100 million. It repeals two different provisions that agencies during the interim testified they recommended those be repealed. One is for the Department of Administration and Information for purposes of school districts joining the Employees and Officials Group Insurance Plan. The other one is the Interfund Loan Authority for the Unemployment Compensation Fund. That's what it does currently. And then the proposed amendment adds to the bill in three other provisions. And Mr. Fuller drafted that amendment and can walk through that amendment in detail if the committee would like.
So under the far right column, which is the amendment, on the first line where it says pages 2 and 3, that's empty, meaning what's in HB 64 remains in HB 64, correct?
Correct, Mr.
Okay.
Chairman.
All right, and I'm sorry, so keep going.
So the second provision remains as in House Bill 64. Going down to the third line, the amendment limits the transfers from the LSRA to the SFP to $250 million in any year. That's in the amendment. Going down to the next line, the amendment puts a limit of not to exceed $400 million for the school foundation borrowing from the LSRA. And then going down to the next line, that's in the bill currently. That's the repeal of the provision for the Unemployment Compensation Fund. And then the next line is actually one that we determined could no longer be modified. So that's the loan that's already been given to the Department of Health for the Veteran Skilled Nursing. The next.
So Polly, shouldn't there be shouldn't we have something in the amendment that strikes that entire language since it's moot now?
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, that was never in the introduced version.
Okay.
So that just sits kind of where it is.
Okay.
Thank you on that. And then the next line is the UW student housing account appropriations that were made in a 2019 session law that were never used. That money still is residing in that account. As it currently stands, it would revert in June of 2029. And there was an amendment put on the Capcom bill to have that revert in 2023. So that one is handled in another bill. And then the final one is borrowing authority for the Hathaway Scholarship Program. And the amendment that the committee requested repeals that provision.
On that last one, what's the bill that is changing the timing on the Hathaway? There's a bill.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, there is a bill that modifies the date of the transfer between the Hathaway expenditure account and the Hathaway reserve account, and allows that money to reside in the expenditure account longer. Right now, it's to the end of it's supposed to be transferred and at the end of the fiscal year. And that was creating some cash flow difficulties. And so that bill modifies it and moves that into October, that date.
If enacted, is that consequential enough to render this provision unnecessary?
Mr. Chairman, this provision for the Hathaway scholarship borrowing on the LISRA has never been used. And testimony from the state treasurer's office, I believe, was that would moving the date for the transfer between those two accounts would improve the cash flow.
Okay. And what's that bill number? Anybody have that off the top of their heads?
Mr. Chairman, I do not have that.
All right, I'll find out before we go to the floor. Senator Anderson.
Mr. Chairman, the Hathaway thing is that delete section 3. Is that what it is in this amendment?
Yep. So, Mr. Chairman, Senator Anderson, yes, on the amendment, and I'm looking at S2202.
Yes.
That's the page 3 after line 21. That section 3 repealing the session law from 2022. That's the Hathaway, the LSRA borrowing for Hathaway.
Yeah. Okay.
So it's on the amendment, page 2, lines 10 to 13.
Correct, Mr. Chairman.
Okay.
And then just one more thing, and I'll pass it over to the committee. Go back to the first page. So remind me, on 5 and 6 is this $100 million guarantee for the SFP out of the LISRA. And then 6 and 7 is the $400 million. What's the difference between these two lines of credit?
Mr. Chairman, one is a guarantee and one is borrowing for cash flow purposes. So one is for when the school foundation program has a deficit, a structural deficit, has a shortage of money. And the other one is for when there's just a cash flow issue. And in that case, it would be paid back. And in the case of the guarantee, it's not required to be paid back.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman, that the 250 is a transfer and the 400 is a loan, isn't it?
5 and 6 is a guarantee that has been used. Is that right? With the newly replenished fund and the increase in property tax base, or is it anticipated to still be needed?
I believe so, that it is, as in the last committee meeting, we discussed that it has been used and it has the potential to be needed in the future.
And the maximum ever drawn on that guarantee was $250,000.
That was the recommendation from Don Richards at the last meeting.
And then on 6 and 7, it's a loan that is not expected to be repaid.
Mr. Chairman, on 6 and 7, that is a loan that is expected to be repaid, and the interest is the rate on the pooled fund investments from the prior fiscal year.
Okay. And that's one where the 400 million we thought gave it God's plenty of room. And this is the one that Don said does need to stay in place because there's a cash flow difference.
Correct. And I believe Mr. Richards testified that both are needed at this point.
Mr. Chairman, it's not expected to be
Senator.
repaid?
Well, there's,
It says it's
excuse me,
repaid.
that's 5 and 6. There's no expectation of repayment
Oh,
or
yeah.
interest.
Yeah.
But it has been the guarantee has kicked in, has it been repaid or is it just gone?
Mr. Chairman, no, it's not been repaid.
All right. More questions from the committee? Well, there's a lot here. Okay. Thank you. Questions from the committee? Agency comment? Thank you, Brian. Thank you, Polly.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman,
Good morning.
committee. Thank you for having us this morning. So, Mr. Chairman, we just have one comment on the bill, and that is regarding the interest rate that is assigned to the let's see here. To the LSRA. Sorry, Mr. Chairman. Oh, right here. On page 2, lines 16 and 17, the interest that would be repaid on the amount borrowed for the Department of Transportation from the Legislative Stabilization Reserve account was changed from the pooled fund investment account interest to the Legislative Stabilization Reserve account interest in the previous fiscal year. Mr. Chairman and committee, we do have a concern about that, given the fact that it's possible that the return on the LSRA in a previous fiscal year could be negative. And so if a loan was to be let from the LSRA to the Department of Transportation in one of those years where we had a negative return or a zero rate of return, then the loan too would then have a negative rate of return or zero rate of return. And so, Mr. Chairman, we would suggest that it be returned to that pooled fund investment or maybe tied to the Treasury bond because Treasury bond interest rate, because the anticipated loan that the DOT would make in the event that there was a government shutdown or something, that's the testimony that they've given that would be the situation in which this occurred would be temporary. And so we would suggest that interest rate be tied to a temporary or not a temporary, but a shorter term interest rate like the Treasury or the.
So that'd be a
pooled fund.
T-bill rather than the bond?
Mr.
And
Chairman,
what maturity of bond, what duration of bond would you suggest?
Mr. Chairman, 1 year.
Mr. Chairman,
Senator Anderson.
we'd rather have a bond interest rate than the pooled fund investments interest rate.
Mr. Chairman, either one, we just recommend that it be a shorter term interest rate rather than be tied to the LSRA previous year as the way the bill currently states.
Okay, is that the only change? I thought there were some other interest rates in here that you were concerned about, because that's not the only one that is it?
Mr. Chairman, that's the only one that we've identified as a concern.
Is the wide on. I see the rest are on the pooled fund investments from the prior fiscal year. Senator Guru.
So would that, just for the sake of consistency, would that be the way to do it? Just put it with the pool fund, just like the others?
Yeah.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman, I wonder why it was changed. Why the one was changed.
Mr. Chairman, my suspicion is that because the loan was made from the LSRA, that the intention would be to tie that interest rate back to what the LSRA would have earned to make it whole. The problem is that there is more volatility potentially in the interest rate in the LSRA, and that it could create that problem that I was referring to.
Especially if it's negative. You
Mhm.
say, why not? Here's your loan plus another $500,000.
Yeah. Yes, Mr. Chairman, that's the concern.
All right. And anything else? So let's go back then to the rationale for why we're even looking at this, which, as I understand it, is trying to get a total return policy on all of our investments, including these cash investments. So walk us through that. And maybe you don't get a total return on something this short, but you get a better return.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, Patrick Fleming, CIO for the Treasurer's Office. Yes, the genesis of what we were trying to do is just simplify the process and restrict so much of the borrowing authority out of the LISRA to reduce, because it's reducing the LISRA return by having all of these different entities, especially if they're borrowing at a lower rate. So what we were trying to do is saying, okay, well, let's make it, if you're taking money out of it right now, let's use a current rate that is indicative of where we are. So Senator Anderson, for instance, last year, the LISRA's return was minus 6.2%. So if you're borrowing, that would be a heck of a deal. If you could borrow it, pay 94 cents back on the dollar. So that just doesn't make sense to have a negative rate. And if you're looking at it now, most of these loans are short term. So let's have something that would be more indicative of what the money would be earning if it was in the LISRA. So the LISRA is composed of 3 different components. So it's really difficult to say what rate it should be. And so we were just saying, keep it simple and using a T-bill rate. And, if you'd prefer to use a 3, 6, 12-month rate, whatever you'd want to do, but that would be more indicative of where they actually are borrowing from. So dollars in, dollars out, that's kind of where the rates would be.
What's the rate on the pooled fund investments from last year, prior fiscal year, right now? What
The
is that number?
SAP,
Pooled fund investments from the prior fiscal year. Because that's the one that's used throughout. We're probably not going to change it to one.
minus 2.6,
Minus?
2.6.
Well, that's not much of an improvement.
Yeah. That's why you don't want to use the last year's return on something like that. Now, just so you all know, those are marked to market. So how this actually works, I'm sorry, Mr. Chairman, Senator,
Please.
those are what we have moved this into is what's called a ladder. So we invested in a 1-year treasury, 2-year treasury, 3-year treasury, 4-year treasury. So as rates go up, we are reinvesting those at a higher rate. But the ones that we invested last year at 1/4, 3/8% coupon, which was 0.5%, now are yielding 4, 4.5, what have you. So you have a mark to market loss, but you will not have a realized loss. As soon as those bonds mature, we then reinvest them. So for instance, March 15th, we have another 250 maturing that were about a 3/8% interest rates. We roll those back up into about 4.8% investment, and then it just rolls down. So that's how it works. You don't have a loss, but a mark to market return will show negative, but it will never be a loss unless the US government fails. That's how it's structured.
So if the LISRA was minus 6%, pooled was minus 2.6%, what would the 1-year T-bill be?
This morning, the 1-year T-bill was 4.8%. 6-month T-bills were 4.89.
1-year T-bill was what?
4.80%.
Okay. And then it's my understanding, Mr. Fleming, in addition to just the rate of return, that there was a liquidity concern because you've got 3 different tranches in the LISRA, short, medium, and long, and just the fact that some huge borrowing may come through forces you to have more liquidity than is desirable. Is that right?
Mr. Chairman, that is correct. So because of the uncertainty of when they can call up the day before and say, hey, we need $500 million in these various different borrowing authorities. So we have to hold a greater degree of liquidity than we normally would, just in case somebody came in to borrow. So that's again, another effort to try and increase the reserve, create more of a higher return than what we've done in the past. So really focusing, what we're really trying to do is just tenor match our assets and liabilities, do the best that we can. So if we have a lower amount, we can take more of that money and put it to work in a higher yielding asset. That's the genesis of the trade.
And the first question the floor will have is, can we quantify that? And are you able to give us any kind of quantification, either in dollars or basis points estimate?
Because this has rarely been used, this would be an instance where you really haven't used it. But if we could take the difference of the problem with LISRA right now, we don't have a long-term return for the LISRA because it's a new fund with the 3 different tranches. So we only have 2 or 3 years of data. So it'd be hard to quantify that. But similar to what we were talking about this morning, what you're saying is short-term interest rates versus a longer-term diversified LISRA. The LISRA should outperform short-term. So I could again use a T-bill with some surrogate, maybe a Bloomberg Barclay Ag. I could come up with something historically what the LISRA would look like with that third. No, actually, I cannot because the amounts that come out of it are so varying.
Okay.
It would be, I couldn't hold that amount constant saying a third because that money vary. The first tranche, the 500 million, that stays there. That's our liquidity tranche. That will never change. But the second and the third, those vary dramatically depending on how much you use throughout the year. So that would be very, very difficult to come up with an IRR historically to show what that would be.
Okay, and you said it's hard to quantify because you only have 2 to 3 years on the LISRA of what?
That is correct. The LISRA's total fund is 1.8% over 3 years, but that's the most data that we have because 3 years ago is when we instituted this.
Oh, I see. Okay.
Where the other funds, we can go back, 10 plus years or from the beginning of when we made the investments.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman.
Senator Anderson.
Mr. Chairman, you're not limited to, you can invest that with the 70-30. You're not limited. That first tranche for sure. What about the other two?
Mr. Chairman, Senator, the way that it was structured with the legislature is that because of the uncertainty, it's a rainy day fund, obviously. So we don't know when it's going to be a Cat 1 or a Cat 5. So what we're doing is saying, okay, the first 500, we have to have immediate liquidity. The next third and a third, we're saying, okay, well, how much, if it was really bad, how quickly could we get the next third? And that would be about 3 days of liquidity. And then the last third is much more of like that 70-30 portfolio, as you alluded to. So you have short-term, intermediate term, and then a total rate of return type of structure. Those are the compositions of the 3 different tranches of the asset class.
So that your intermediate liquidity is 3 days and between cash and 3 days, there's a significant increase in the return on the investment.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, just because of what it's invested in. The front is just the short-term instruments. The intermediate is the Bloomberg Barclay aggregate that has a duration of about 6 years. And so 1% increase in interest rate, that fund would either drop or increase by approximately 6%.
Oh, I see. The second tranche, you could access the cash in 3 days.
That is correct.
Okay.
I cannot do it immediately, but going through with our managers and so forth and what we have internally, we could get that within 3 days if we needed to.
Okay.
And then the third tranche, just because of the volatility that would be associated with it, that's not a great liquidity provider. That's the one that you don't want to touch. And so that's another one where you're looking at references, typically using that to fund something creates issues.
Okay. Senator Anderson.
Mr. Chairman, with these bigger organizations that we're talking about, it just doesn't seem like they need an immediate cash call. But you do get that, I guess. 3 days call is not quick enough for these institutions that you're working with, like whoever's borrowing from you.
Mr. Chairman, Senator, yes, we could do that. But what would happen, let's say if we had a combination between an event with the state and then also if the government shut down, that you needed funds, which, as you know, we have the borrowing authority coming up in July, which they're threatening to shut down. So something like that, or any type of immediate event. And then you had borrowing authority on top of it. If that happened, we would draw down tranche 1 and 2, but then you're left with this very volatile, longer term tranche. So what you really want to do is draw 1, 2, and 3 down together as much as you can, so you don't have a mismatch between the liabilities and volatility with what the need is. And that's why the LISRA, in what we were talking about in 89, the LISRA was not included in that total rate of return strategy because of its nuanced needs. You have to structure that to something that you'd say, okay, well, how much would you have? But if we do not know, and someone could borrow $1 billion, or I think, what is the borrowing authority now? It's 8. Well, for this, but total 1 billion. I cannot not have higher liquidity. Now, we don't have $1 billion in liquidity, but we normally have approximately 200 to 300 excess liquidity in this fund because of that. And so when we were going through this bill in CAPFIN, we said, well, how do we get that money and put it to use? And I said, well, reduce the amounts because we don't use it. And then that would free me up. And that's why this bill was originally put forth, is to try and allow us to have the ability to put that money into a better use.
So I want to circle back to Senator Anderson's question. Let me give it, for instance. Page 5 and 6, the guarantee for the school foundation program account is invoked and they need $250 million. You're going to know that's coming in sooner than 3 days, aren't you? I mean, you know, you're running your cash, you got a LISRA manager, they're forecast, you've got treasury operation, you're forecasting cash. You're going to know weeks or months that you've got a looming shortfall like that, wouldn't you?
Mr. Chairman, on the school foundation, we have a better look through, but in other ones, they can come a day before, and Deputy Williams would be able to tell you what on the Department of Transportation, I think the earliest would have been a week or so that we've seen in
Well,
other
Mr.
funds.
Chairman, the Department of Transportation hasn't utilized this borrowing authority for many, many years.
I thought they said they'd never used it because they're.
Okay, never used.
Hmm?
Yeah, and to my knowledge, it has either been a very long time or never been used. But I thought I had heard that it was like 2000.
So you don't know whether they need it on the moments, but you'd know there's a looming government shutdown that White House.
Mr. Chairman, that's true. Yeah, you would know, but I'm sorry, you were talking about the school foundation program guarantee.
No,
so
I was talking about Whiteout. I thought you started talking about Whiteout. Did I got you mixed up?
Sorry, Mr. Chairman.
Whichever, which one of these would you only, I mean, I'm with Senator Anderson. I would think you'd see it coming at least a month in advance. Which one of these is likely to just manifest itself, boom, overnight? We need $250 million. Good thing we have 3 days liquidity. I don't want to manage your portfolio. I'm with Jim. I don't understand the 3 days.
Mr. Chairman, the first tranche was promulgated by the legislature, saying, when going through that, saying in a time of need, how much would we need on a moment's notice? And that amount was stated as 500 million. That was not our decision. That was a legislative decision to come up with that.
That's the tripwire that's specified in on pages 5 and 6, the guarantee for the SFP. You can't go below that 500 million on that draw. That's the 500 million you're talking about. Or was just elsewhere to specify 500 million.
It's
Mr. Chairman, it's a different one. So what you were talking, the trigger on the school foundation, that is it. There is a $500 million trigger, but that's a different $500 million that the legislature has directed us to keep in the more liquid tranche of the LSRA. So
Okay.
there's the same number, but two different issues going on there.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman, what I was saying is that the total potential draw that we'd have is close to $1 billion. If some unforeseen thing happened, you could have $1 billion. So we're saying, well, we clearly don't want to have $1 billion in liquidity because the probability of that event happening is quite small. But we do have to have something just in case, because there's still, even if we access the liquidity in that intermediate tranche, there definitely is a cost to doing that. We would take a hit to say, hey, liquidate 500 million. That would not be a free, no cost. Our portfolio would take a hit because of they would have to sell everything. So what we do is we have a couple $100 million excess just in case of all these billion-dollar potential hits. And so the purpose of what we're saying is if we could reduce all of these, then we could reduce that amount even more and have minimal, if any, cash available.
Okay,
Oh,
Senator Anderson.
Mr. Chairman, so I'm adding this up. I got 1.4 billion in the LSRA. You're saying we have 500 million long-term that we want to keep and make sure we have that. How much do we have in the 3-day call in the immediate area? Didn't you say something about $1 billion in the immediate area?
Mr. Chairman, Senator, it would be approximately another 500 million would be the intermediate.
Oh,
I thought immediate was the $500,000 that was specified by the legislature.
Mr. Chairman, it was 500 that is specified in the first tranche. That has to, we always have to
cash.
keep 500 in cash.
Okay.
The remaining amount is set about just to provide the liquidity between the two. But we don't want those to be significantly off because what we'd like to do is draw down all 3 tranches at the same time, unless it's a very short-term need. For instance, like this, if we needed to come up with this money, the 100 million immediately, we would not touch the 3rd tranche because we'd really take a hit on the bid offer spreads there because we know it's going to be repaid in a very short period. That would just be a short-term temporary fix. Let's take the front end. And that's why we were trying to tie it to a T-bill, which would be more indicative of that front end return.
so Mr. Chairman,
You
the 3-day calls.
Turn your mic on.
The 3-day call is about 400 million then, if both of those, if tranche 1 and tranche 3 have 500 million, it's about 400 million.
Mr. Chairman, Senator, yes, that changes just depending upon the draw and how much we have, and we vary that all the time.
Yeah,
And also depending upon the outlook that we have on the markets as well. So every year we do an asset allocation and we look at it and we say, well, that riskier tranche, like right now, is riskier. So let's reduce that component and put more into the shorter end or more safe securities. And so we actively manage that as well.
yeah. Okay, thanks.
Anything else for Don or Patrick? Anything, Senator Guru? Before I let these guys go, you have anything? Okay, thank you very much. Any further agency comment? Comment from the public? I'll close comment. It's to the committee.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Any amendments?
We've got this one. I would move this, standing committee amendment number 2.
Okay, second. Discussion. What happened to 1?
Hey, it's just, Mr. Chairman, it should just be S2202 at the top.
Oh. Okay, it's not number 2 then.
Okay.
Okay.
There you go. Yeah. Discussion. Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed, no. What do you want to do about this interest rate? Senator Guru?
I think we just put it with the pool rate. Track it like all the others, just put it with the pool rate. I know right now it's not, but that's,
Problematic, but
yes. But
so then which one did you need to amend, Mike? There was one that was out of whack.
it was the first one. The one on page 2, line 16? Yeah, 16, 17. Should just change. What do I need to do?
Oh, okay. It changed it to the rate of return on the LISRA, change it back to pooled.
Second.
No, wait. Yeah. The pool account or 0. Whichever's
r-
greater.
rate on the pooled account from the prior year, but in any event, no less than zero.
So, Mr. Chairman, if I may, just a couple notes with this. In 2018, before 2018, this provision actually read the greater of 2% or the rate of return on the pooled fund investments. The legislature struck the 2% and left it at pooled fund investments. The only note I would leave the committee with is page 1, the bill title. The bill title does not expressly mention interest rates. The change that was made on page 2, line 16 and 17 was seen more as a conforming amendment. Since the funds were borrowed from the LSRA, the interest rate would be tied to that. The only, phrase in the bill title that may be related to this would be amending or eliminating unnecessary or obsolete borrowing authority or guarantees. So I think it would be up for the committee to decide, the extent in which it could amend interest rates in the bill.
Go ahead, Senator Guru. I can see you had a lightning strike.
Oh, no. Well, I'm trying to. How do we do it? How do we?
Go ahead.
Mr. Chairman, can I
Yeah.
just, Mr. Fuller, can you repeat what was originally in statute?
Yep, Mr. Chairman, Senator Nethercott, this was pre-2018. It was the greater of 2% or the rate of return on or earned on the, I believe, pooled fund investments. And pre-2018, I think the reference was to the LSRA. It wasn't to, I think in 2018, it was changed to the rate of return on pooled fund investments. So before 2018, it was 2%, the greater of 2% or the rate of return on the LSRA.
I move that language to be reinserted into here.
In here or everywhere where it makes reference to,
Wherever it would be conforming to this
Yeah, every-
LSRA
All right.
interest rate. Yeah.
okay, so repeat it again, Brian.
Repeat that language.
So, Mr. Chairman, are we only, I just want to confirm, we're only talking about 91418 on page 2, correct?
Correct.
Okay. In that case, it would just be a matter of adding, I think, the greater of 2% to the existing, to what's already in the bill. If you wanted to go back to the pre-2018 language.
So we would strike Lizra of return.
No,
No,
Oh, okay.
No, Mr. Chairman, I think it would just be, going back to the pooled fund investments and adding the greater of 2%.
so we would strike Lizra. That's
Yeah.
what, that's what, how it was in 2017, Mr. Fuller.
So on line 16 of return earned
On pool fund investments.
on pooled fund investments, but in any event, no.
So, Mr. Chairman, if you wanted to read page 2, line 15, strike equal to and insert the greater of 2% or the rate of return earned on pooled fund investments.
That is my motion, and I believe that LSO can
Second,
finesse
Yeah.
the grammatical corrections there. Yes,
and this is the only place you want to do that.
yes.
Okay. Discussion?
And
Senator
so
Guru.
Brian, that keeps us where we need to be. I mean, with the bill title and all that.
Mr. Chairman, that's your call.
Oh, good. Okay. Yeah, then I think it does. All right.
I think it's less question. I think he's saying it's less question.
Who's going to argue with that?
Very good. That's conforming. Okay. Any further amendments?
we need to move that amendment.
We need to vote on, did we
That
vote on
amendment?
her amendment?
No, we didn't vote on. her.
All those in favor of the amendment, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. Motion carries. Further discussion? Call the roll.
Mr. Chairman, who prepares our amendments? Who can? Brian, can you work with Linda?
I didn't hear you. Can you speak up just a little bit more?
I just want to make sure that
Yeah.
Linda has permission to work with Brian.
I captured the amendment on line 15 and 16, and I can repeat that if you'd like, and then I have a copy of the O2 proposed amendment.
Because she's that good.
Yep.
Because
I
she's
can
that
repeat that
good.
if you wish.
No. You're that good.
So line 15, strike equal to and insert the greater of 2% or the rate, then keep the rate of return earned on strike or keep unstrike pool fund investment and strike the legislative stabilization reserve account.
That'd be standing committee amendment number 2.
That's a standing committee. So you'll have 2 amendments on this.
Okay.
one.
All right. Call the roll.
Senator Anderson,
Aye.
Senator Guru,
Aye.
Senator Nethercott, Senator Salzar, and Chairman Kinsey.
Aye. Mike, you ready for this one? Let's talk about it a little bit. Let's talk about it a little bit later. HB 208 School Foundation Program Reserve Account Investments. That was again an interim bill. Let's take a look at what this one does. Okay, Patrick and Don, are you familiar with HB 208?
Hello again, Mr. Chairman, Committee, Don Williams, Deputy State Treasurer. Mr. Chairman, this bill seems to be just simply allowing the this balance in this account, this school foundation program reserve account to be deposited and, or excuse me, invested in equities. Mr. Chairman, the comment that we have about that is that there are no sideboards or that are associated with this account. And as a result, we do not believe that we would invest this account in equities, even though the permission was here without any sideboards, because Mr. Chairman, we don't know, it kind of goes back to the previous bill. We don't know what the uses of this account would be. So for us to invest in equities, that would tie the funds up then. And if there was a subsequent draw on these funds, we would have to liquidate from those investments at a cost, as Patrick described in his previous testimony. And so we would not make that decision to make the investments that way, just given the fact that there are no sideboards on this account. So while this legislation is fine, I mean, the granting authority for the investment doesn't hurt anything. We just want you to be aware that we would not do that.
So Don, go to page 2, starting on line 10. Here's your sideboards. In adopting investment policy statements for the account, the State Loan and Investment Board shall seek to preserve the balance of the account in a manner that strives for the highest possible risk-adjusted total return consistent with the appropriate level of safety and liquidity. You're not going to be just drifting on your own. You're going to have an investment statement from SLIB.
You're right, Mr. Chairman. That's how to invest the funds. That's very clear how we would invest the funds. What's not clear is how these funds would be used. So for instance, when we were just talking about the other bill. So when we were, Mr. Chairman, when we were talking about the other bill and we were talking about how in the LSRA, we have to leave that $500 million in a more liquid investment because the possible draws against that are unknown. So we would want to have that in a more liquid cash type of investment so that we could meet the needs of the draw. There are no sideboards for how this funds would be expended. So the investment's very clear, but we wouldn't invest with in a more illiquid investment or an equity investment just because we don't know what kind of draws would be made against the account.
So,
Senator Guru.
so if I'm tracking you right, what you got here is half a loaf. You've got the investment side, but you never know who's going to make the call and for how much. And so since you don't know that, you're not going to put it in equities because someone's going to walk in and say, I need $500 million today.
Mr. Chairman, excellent.
Well, what do you want?
Mr. Chairman,
The other half.
No, what do you want? You want us to tell you an 80-20 portfolio? What kind of sideboards do you want?
Mr. Chairman, I
Yeah.
think in my view, I think this is a great idea that we need to take to the interim and hear from the schools and understand how that reserve account has been historically utilized, their plans for it in the future, how it interfaces as well with our consolidation of accounts and what type of draws are to be expected from that reserve account. I don't know that we have that information and they can't tell us either.
Well, we studied it on the interim and I thought you were the origin of this.
No,
Yes.
Mr. Chairman, no, that's not correct. I'm not sure on your staff, but this is by the House Appropriations Committee. This was not studied in the interim.
It's not a joint bill.
This was just something that the House Appropriations Committee did. It was not, and in our talks with the Department of Education, this is a rather obscure account that doesn't have any, that does not have any guidelines on it. The only nexus to education is the name of the account. So,
Is this one that's wiped out in that other bill? Did we get rid of those school SFPRA? I think we have the CSLPRA and the SFP. I don't think we have an SFPRA. Assuming that bill passes.
I think, Mr. Chairman, that's part of my comments. I don't know that we really fully appreciate what we've just done this year. I mean, truly, in a way that allows us to continue to add frosting on the cake.
Fail to appreciate what we hope we've done this year.
Correct.
Oh,
And I,
Mr. Chairman,
Please.
my suggestion would be at the least that we lay this one back until next week and then ask our friends on the House
I was gonna go.
what they
talk-
had in mind.
Yeah, I
And
was gonna go
I got a
talk to
feeling,
Bob.
what we're gonna hear, it was kind of like yesterday with that account with the account that we got put in at the last minute, that last bill we did.
Wildlife natural.
Yeah,
Resources.
Wildlife Trust Fund. They put it in at the last minute, but they didn't have it all together. And so even they said, I talked to them this morning, they said, yeah, that was just kind of
Yeah,
we did it on the fly. I got a feeling this may be the same thing.
we're gonna go ahead and lay this one back.
Mr. Chairman, the expenditure they're talking about, line 16, page 1 says only be expended by the legislative appropriation. So I would think they wouldn't get an immediate call on the money if it goes through this process. So I don't know. We'll see what they say.
You know, it's yet another coffee can. Hopefully that other bill goes through and we get rid of it.
Okay.
Okay, thank you. Thank you both very much. Hey, Patrick, what are interest rates gonna do next year? Okay, HB 38, Wyoming National Guard member referral, and I guess the agency is gonna walk us through this one. And remember, gentlemen, we're just here on the appropriation, but we do appreciate a thumbnail sketch of the bill and what it does.
Yes, sir. Good morning, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. I will first say that Chairman Boner sends his regrets. He's feeling ill this morning, or otherwise he'd be here as well. So
It's getting closer to you guys. It jumped the aisle.
cool. You'll see the two bills before you really came about as a reaction to reduced assigned strength in the Wyoming National Guard. If you take a step back a couple of years, you'll see that the Army National Guard was about 100% strength. The air had been about 94% strength, and they were continuing to drive forward. COVID hit, and along with some other actions, the difficulty to get into the military, ASVAB scores, physical, mental health, that sort of thing, and we created what I call as a bathtub in strength that we're still attempting to get out of. These two bills will actually help us get after that bathtub as I see it. The first one, the National Guard referral, really gets us a $500 referral for every National Guardman that refers somebody that gets enlisted. That's only for 3 years. And so the intent is just to get us out of that bathtub and back onto sustained. At the 3-year mark, we'll have to make a decision about where we go if we continue to do it. My intent is not to continue it after the 3 years. I hope that we're out of that bathtub and we can continue to sustain with the resources that we have already. The second bill, which I don't know if you want me to talk about that, sir, but it it more gets on the retention side of the house. So on the retention piece, the Wyoming legislature has been very generous in giving our National Guardsmen the ability to continue their education in Wyoming schools. Right now, you can get a degree by serving in the National Guard, either a certificate or a degree, but that's only for the individual. What we propose to do in this legislation is if you extend for no less than 3 years, that you can take that benefit and transfer it to a spouse or potentially a child as that goes forward, so that in exchange for continuing the retention or continuing service in the National Guard. So these two bills were really focused on the strength side of the house. That is my number one priority within the National Guard right now. I think if I do the projections, if we don't do anything different, we're looking at 2029, 2030 before we get back into 100% strength. And that's simply, I think, too long in service for the state and nation for us to do that. So this is attempting to accelerate that strength angle back up to get us to at 102%. Sort of a thumbnail sketch of what these two bills get after, sir.
Okay, and walk us through the cost on HB 38, the recruitment referral program.
Yes, sir. I've turned that over to Chris Smith. And just for the record, my name is Major General Greg Porter, and I'm the Adjutant General.
Mr. Chairman, Chris Smith with the Military Department. So with the referral bill, Senate File 38, you'll see down on page 4, Section 2, there is an appropriation of $215,000, which is a one-time appropriation for the 3-year period of this program. It automatically sunsets in 3 years. The $215,000 originally, in working with LSO in the interim, we somehow came up with $808,000, just an outrageous number. Still don't know how we got there. We did some further analysis of our projected gains and losses and how short we would be of our 100%, 102% manning goal. And we ended up with about 143 referrals a year, 430 something to get us whole in the 3-year period. That is what drives the $215,000, a much more reasonable number. So it's basically, we're projecting 143 referrals at most for the 3 years of the program. I will note that in this bill, as in the next one, it can only be spent for this purpose. If it's not spent, it automatically reverts. So that's the dollar amount in Section 2 on page 4 on to 5. So I pending the committee's questions, I'll be glad to answer it best I can.
So we have the fiscal note of 952. Are we to disregard that?
Mr. Chairman, yes, the fiscal note, the House Appropriations gave it a haircut down to 215, which was after the original fiscal note.
Okay, and then there's the very last page has a buffalo that looks like he's dissolving in midair, enterprise ETS. And it lists desktops, printers, monitors. What is all that?
Mr. Chairman, what happened was out of the interim, we put a half FTE person on 2 of the other bills. Well, this bill and the medical insurance repayment bill, which is a Senate file that's now on the House side. During this session, in discussion with our chairman and joint in the Transportation, Highways, Military Affairs, it was decided that we need one body to run these 3 programs that these 3 bills introduced this year would have. So we put that in the next bill, in the tuition bill. This bill, Senate File 38, it was removed. So there's none of the ETS costs, none of the person costs are in this bill. It is purely an appropriation of the $215,000.
Made that easy. Okay, do we want to go ahead and move this bill or finish the other one? Second discussion.
Mr. Chairman,
yes.
I have a question. We're saying there's an appropriation of 215. The agency estimate of administrative impact, 157, that's all federal. The 215 is general file, right?
Mr. Chairman, Senator Anderson, yeah, the 215 is general fund.
Please.
So what is the referral award? Is it 500, did you say?
Mr. Chairman, Senator Salazar, the way the bill is structured, it's up to $500 with
Okay.
the attorney. Attorney General, sorry. The adjutant general setting the amount, but no more than $500. And I can tell the committee that a couple of other states, about 5 states, are starting this process. The most furthest along is Vermont. They've had it since January 22. A similar program, it's slightly different. They give $1,000 in 2 steps. We're trying to keep it really simple. And they have experienced about 150 leads, as they call them, in 22. So our 143 per year, which is what we came up with for the funding, seems to be online at the upper end.
No, I think this works. I think referral works. So
Yes, sir.
Mr. Chairman?
Yeah.
So it's up to $500 per. So how do you make the decision whether it's 200 or 500? Or are they just all going to be 500?
Yes, sir. They're all going to be 500 unless we get, unless this becomes wildly successful and we have to start to bring it back a little bit. I hope that's a problem that we have, but it's going to be 500, I think is where it's going to answer. Sorry there, Mr. Chairman.
No, good. Anything follow?
Thank you.
Just not to get too far off topic, but do you or do the feds compensate you for a signing bonus program? Is there a signing bonus?
Mr. Chairman, depending on the military occupational specialty on the Army side or on the Air Guard side, the AFSC, there are bonuses for the individual that enlists for that incentive. Yes, sir.
So give me an example.
So let's see, $10,000 for one enlistment. I think our folks in the cyber realm get a pretty nice enlistment bonus right now. So about $10,000.
And Mr. Chairman, if I may, the purpose of this is not the individual soldier or airman that joins our ranks, what they get.
Right. This is
We're trying to make everybody a fisherman.
Yeah, no, I get his referral. I'm getting this off task.
Yes, sir.
Further discussion? Clerk will call the roll.
Senator Anderson,
Aye.
Senator Guru.
Aye.
Senator Nethercutt, Senator Salzar, and Chairman Kinsky.
Aye. Okay, let's turn our attention to 59 and the appropriation there. It's tuition reimbursement and it's you can pass it along to a family member. Okay. Now on page 9, we have a different appropriation than well, is the fiscal note on this one accurate? $750,000.
Mr. Chairman, yes, you'll see on page 8, subparagraph A, the appropriation to fund the tuition expansion is the $745,529. And essentially what that's paying for. So this is an existing educational program that we've had since 2001. It is one of the top 2 reasons people tell us they join the Guard in the lower ages, not coming off of active duty. And it's been fairly successful. I think the last number I saw, about 170 people are currently enrolled in a school taking advantage of the program. This current semester, that number fluctuates a little bit until they get to the add drop date and figure out how many people, especially since most of the schools have gone to a per credit charge instead of a certain amount. So what this bill does is, as you said, expand it to for an additional, there's a 6-year service commitment in the existing program in the statute. So to take advantage of this program, you have to commit to 6 years in the military. If you want to give it to your spouse or a military dependent, and we cite there's a bunch of rules about who can be a dependent, you have to sign up for another 4 years. So essentially what this does is help our retention because it requires people to take advantage of this to essentially be committed to us for 10 years. What we have found historically is at the 10-year point of a typical 20-year career, we kind of have. They've bought into the lifestyle. They enjoy serving our state and country. and they're going to stay till 20 years. So we really were trying in this bill to get them to that midpoint so that we keep them longer. So this really is a retention incentive. So the 745,000 essentially pays for, I think we figured out under, the number's a little off because we used it on prior tuition costs at UW. And I think it's $6,629 is the tuition and fees for a semester in state. So using that number, this would pay for about 112 people for that one semester.
And you have 170 now.
Yes. So what we were anticipating, again, never tried this program. What we were anticipating about 40% increase in participation by being able to give it, especially to spouses. And it's a guesstimate.
Please.
So how is this different from the new GI Bill? I know when I left, I reverted all my education credits to my 14-year-old who now has his college paid. Are your recruits able to participate in the new GI Bill, or is because they're the Guard? Can you explain that to me?
Mr. Chairman, Senator Salazar, as best I am able. So what you did and what I did in terms of transferring to a child is the post 9/11 GI Bill. It requires a certain amount of service already before you can do that. We're talking, we're trying to get the newbies who wouldn't really have access to that yet.
Okay. And then on page 8 over to 9 is that elusive FTE shows up finally to administer 3 different programs.
Yes, Mr. Chairman. So that was the estimate we got working with ANI and our state folks. So $130,675 out of the general fund. Again, salary and benefits. And then on to page 9, you'll see a separate amount beginning on line 6 on page 9, which is $109,412. That is where we get the little buffalo symbol, and I have that.
ETS page on the, okay. got
Yes,
it.
sir. And what's interesting about that is ETS estimates 104,000 in one-time costs and then about 5,400 in long-term costs. The consideration of that is this program will require, we're thinking of, an active spreadsheet, a website in order for people to apply and do all that. And so that ETS came up with 109,412.
Mr. Chairman, I'm confused then.
Senator Anderson.
It says our fiscal note is 745,922, which is that first amount on page 8. But then on page 8, we have another 130,000. And then on page 9, we have another 109, but it doesn't reflect in the fiscal note.
You're missing, or do you have an agency administrative?
Yeah,
impact following
yeah.
that?
Yeah, I do. Yep. But it doesn't have 109 on that either. No. Nor does it have the other. And these two say that they're coming out of the general fund. From the general fund, it isn't administrative.
Well, I see on the administrative impact, upper right-hand corner, benefit costs 136.75,
Right.
which is what he said subparagraph B was. On
Oh,
page
yeah.
9, I see subparagraph C 109,412. And that's the ETS. I'm not seeing a separate 109.
Oh, yeah, those two up, yeah, 104 and the 5. I see.
Okay.
So
gotcha.
those don't come out of the general fund or do?
Mr. Chairman, Senator Anderson, my understanding is they come out of the general fund,
Oh,
as do all charges or bills paying to ETS.
So this is really a little more than 745.
Initially,
It looks, Mr. Chairman, if I can, it looks like my estimation, we're doing about $1 million in ongoing to the military department. It'll become part of your.
745 plus 5 for the ETS.
Plus, Mr. Chairman, the 130 for the person,
Okay.
Yeah.
For the
salary and benefits.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
So are you phasing that out after 3 years too, or is this ongoing?
It's
Um,
ongoing.
Mr. Chairman, Senator Salazar, no, this would then, unlike the referral bill, which has a phase out, this would then become part of our general budget. We would have to include in the budget and justify it to this committee in the budget cycle.
Okay. Further questions for the military department? We sure appreciate what you folks do. Thank you for your service.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
what is your overall budget?
Mr. Chairman, Madam Senator, are you talking on the state side? It's about a $9 million is what, and I think that's going to come down a little bit with Youth Challenge. Money's not being appropriated that way. We haven't quite figured out what that's going to look like yet when it's done. It's part of an interim topic that we're going to work in the committee, but it's 9 million is what state. We get about 110 million on the federal side.
I always cite you when people say we need to quit taking federal funds. And I said, you just shut down the National Guard.
So this would increase your overall state fund budget by 10%, this bill.
Mr. Chairman, math, but yes, I think that'd be accurate. Depending on what we bring down from the Youth Challenge, because that's a couple of $1 million of binding him to get that done. So.
Okay, further discussion? Thank you, gentlemen. It's to the committee. Second, moved in second, discussion, amendments? Call the roll.
Senator Anderson,
Aye.
Senator Guru,
Aye.
Senators Nethercutt, Senator Salazar, and Chairman Kinsky.
Aye. That concludes everything that we've got.
Will you want license plates later? Will you want license plates?
So thank
Sure
you.
you
I'll,
do.
I'll declare the meeting adjourned. So turn that off, Linda. Thank you. We're just going to